Well, hello there. I'm glad you've joined me again today for a broadcast. It's been a week or something like that since I've done my last one. I was really hoping to get something done here earlier than that, but it seems like these days just keep rolling by. Of course, I have a good excuse for why I wasn't able to get on the broadcast earlier, because in order for me to, as many of you might know, when we were in Arizona, I was selling real estate, and my license down there, I felt to keep it active because I still do get referrals, and I've got people in the pipeline and what have you. So my license actually is scheduled to expire the end of June, and in order for me to maintain that license or to renew it, I actually had to take 24 hours or 24 hours of credits for continuing education. And boy, I'll tell you what, since I haven't really been active in the real estate and everything the last couple of years, um, that was a bit of a challenge. But I got through it and I passed the complete 24 hours with, what was it, in the 80s, 82 or 84, I think 84 or something like that, which I needed a minimum of 80 to pass the test. So I was actually pretty pleased that I was able to get that done on that level. So anyway, that kept me going though for hours and hours at a day because man, you had to do a lot of reading and it took a lot of time. But hey, I congratulate myself and say I got it done and I'm good to go now for another couple of years. So I can actually I can renew my license in June and I'll be good to go for another couple of years, which might be the last time I renew it. But anyway, it was a challenge that I felt I needed to do and wanted to do, and so I got it finished. But what it did do is it set me back about 5 or 6 days, 5 days or so, to really do anything else because I was really focused on getting that finished because I did not want to drag it out. I had a bit of a time frame when I had to have it done. So anyway, that having been said, I've got it all done and I am now good to go. And I'm back in the saddle to do some broadcasting again. And also, I want to do some teaching and also get a few more podcasts up. It's just been a while since I've had any of those up, but you just do so much. And it seems like one day runs into another. Today, what I like to do is I like to talk to you about laboring to enter into rest. Now, that may seem like a paradox, but really it is not. Because when you consider all the stuff that's going on in the world, the last time did a broadcast, I spoke a bit more about that. Today, I'm going to stay more in just the focus in the realm of teaching. But when we look around at what's going on, it is pretty concerning. It seems like freedoms are being encroached upon everywhere you turn. Freedom of speech is really being pressed down hard unless you are speaking the woke agenda. You really are pretty much in a place where your voice is not supposed to be heard. And when as things continues coming on, and especially with, as I say, things going on overseas in the Ukraine at the present time, that could blow up into a major war that would not only affect the world over there, but it certainly would also affect the United States and Canada and pretty much the rest of the world. And so we certainly are praying about that, and we want to see the Lord have His way in all of that. I think that what we're seeing on the news is really not what's really going on there. So we really need to stay tuned and stay focused on what the Lord is saying and how He's speaking to us. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about because I want to take some scripture here from the third and fourth chapters of Hebrews, where it talks about entering into our rest. And I wanted to read it a little bit there because it's important here. So he says in the latter part of chapter 3 of Hebrews, he said, "For you who, having heard, believed. Indeed, was it not all of you who came out of Egypt led by Moses? Now, with whom was he angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter into his rest, but to those who did not obey?" So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. And so then he goes right into the next chapter and he says, since a promise remains of entering into his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. Now, what he's doing here is he's referring back to Old Testament Israel as they were coming out of Egypt, and they were on their way to the promised land. And they were on a journey that really could have been accomplished in less than 2 weeks. But when they got to the edge of the Canaan, of the edge of by the Jordan River, Kadesh Barnea, they sent out, as you know, 12 spies to check out the land because they were told it was a land that flowed with milk and honey, a land in which there were cities and vineyards and crops and all that they had not produced. Really, what that was is after their years of slavery in Egypt, God was now giving them a rest from those years of slavery and bringing them into a country where they had cities that they hadn't built. They had vineyards they had not planted. They had orchards they had not planted. They had grain they had not planted. So really, excuse me, in all practical purposes, what the Lord was saying is, I'm giving you rest from those years of your slavery. All you had to do is conquer the land. Come in, follow me in, and actually take over the land because, as he had said early in Genesis, he had waited to do that until the iniquity of the Amorites had been fulfilled. And so God is very patient, but when he establishes a provision, or when he establishes even a judgment for an area, he's very patient for that to happen. But there is an end to that patience, and when it finally runs out, whatever he has proclaimed is what is going to happen. So when the spies came back, as you probably know the story, when the spies came back from checking out in Egypt, they said, "Hey, it's a great land." I mean, it took a couple people just to carry a cluster of grapes. They were so rich and so abundant over there. But the people, when they heard them say, "There's giants over there, and there's lots of things that we're going to have to do and overcome," those people were starting murmuring in their hearts, and they just were ready to turn back to Israel, turning back to Egypt. And we read this in the 14th chapter of Numbers, where Joshua and Caleb, of course, they had a completely different story. They said, "We saw the giants, the sons of Anak that came from the giants, but we were like grasshoppers on our own sight, so we were in their sight." But he said they weren't afraid of that. So then in the whole congregation, here's what happened. The whole congregation lifted up their voices and they cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness." God was going to give them the opportunity to do that. "Why has the Lord brought us out of this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should become victims? Would it not have been better for us to return to Egypt?" And so they said to one another, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt." Now, as we make an application of that to our time and our situation here, we can look at the way things are going in the world, where after this COVID thing has brought a stalemate to economy and a lot of other things here the last couple of years. We could say, "Man, I wish we could just go back to the way it was." But I'll give you my own humble opinion. I don't think it's ever going to go back to the way it was. In fact, as far as the church is concerned, as far as spirituality is concerned, I don't think we should ever want to go back to the way it was. I believe that we need to be focused on God's provision. We need to be focused on what he has made available to us, because I believe he has a rest for us. Now, when I say I believe he has a rest for us, we need to understand that the things that we see going on, if you're watching the news still, which I don't, I have other sources of information, but if you are aware of what's going on in the world, it can be very stressful. It can seem like everything is closing in on us. It can seem like, man, the end must be just around the corner. And we can get really discouraged. We get anxious, and we can say, "Man, I wish we could just go back to the way it was." I wish that we could just go back to life as it was been before pre-COVID. No, that's not what God intends for us. That's not what he has for us. He has more for you and me. He wants us to enter into a rest. We're going to read here in a couple of minutes that there is still a rest that remains for the people of God. What is that rest? Well, we know that rest is in Jesus Christ. We know that he is the one who not only saved us, he is the one who not only redeemed us, he is the one who not only gave us a hope for the future, he is the one also who is our rest, because the deeper we get into him and the larger our trust becomes in what he has done, but even more than what he has done, as our trust increases in who he is, we will come into a rest that we did not know existed. We'll come into a rest where it doesn't really matter what goes on around us. It is that we are at peace in our heart. We're at peace in our soul. And that's really what matters. That's really what he wanted to bring to us. And so how do we get to that place? Well, as I title this, we labor to enter into rest. It is a challenge. When we enter into rest, it doesn't mean that we're passive. It doesn't mean we're not doing anything. But what it really means is we have come to the place where we're content with our present circumstances with a hope for what's going to come tomorrow. And so how do we labor to enter into that rest? Well, we're going to need to read a couple more scriptures here. Let's see what the scripture says. We'll pick it up in verse 2 of chapter 4 here of Hebrews. It says, "For indeed, the gospel was preached to us as well as to them, but the word which they heard did not profit them." Why not? Because the word that they had heard was not mixed with faith in those who heard it. There's the indictment. There is the sentence. Those out there in the wilderness had heard the word. They heard God call them and said, "Listen, I've got a land for you in which you have labored for. It's there. It's just there for the taking. It's there for your rest, to give you a rest from those couple of hundred years of being slaves in Egypt." But they could not see beyond their present circumstances. So I sometimes say that we tend to want to settle for short-term deliverance and forfeit our long-term inheritance or our long-term possession. In other words, what we are expecting and what we believe for is not coming to us, sometimes we're willing to compromise as well. Maybe I'll just settle for what seems right at the moment. But that's not laboring to enter into rest. To labor to enter into rest, we need to lay aside all the things that are clamoring for our attention, all the things that clamor for our spiritual energy, and say, though I don't see it today, though I may not see it tomorrow, I believe God has prepared a place for us. There is a rest that remains to the people of God. Listen to what he said. He said, "For we who have believed do enter into that rest." And he said, "I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest, although the works were finished from before the foundation of the world." Now, here's what we got to understand. Even while Israel was still in Egypt, God had prepared the land of Canaan for them. It was prepared. He had that plan in place from the foundation of the world. And I can tell you something else. God has a plan for you that has not yet been fulfilled, but it's been ordained for you from before the foundation of the world. The challenge is that we need to believe that, and we need to allow him to do whatever is necessary to strip away the unbelief, strip away the anxiety, strip away the stresses, strip away those things in us that would want us to go back to the way things were. No, I don't ever want to go back to the way things were. I want to keep moving forward. I guess maybe it's that pioneer spirit in me, but I want to go forward. I'm pushing forward to get into that place of rest that I know the Lord has for us. So he goes on here and he says this. For he has spoken in a certain place on the seventh day this way, God rested on the seventh day from all his works. Even God rested. And again he said in this place, "They shall not enter my rest. Since therefore there remains that some must enter it, and those whom it was first preached did not enter because of disbelief." Again, he designates a certain place, and he says to David, "Today, after such a long time as it's been said, today, if you'll hear my voice, do not harden your hearts." Now, what is he saying? Now, listen carefully. "For if Joshua had given them," referring back to Joshua in the Old Testament, "if Joshua had given them rest, then he would not afterwards have spoken of another day." So when he said this to David, he said there still remains a rest to the people of God. It was after they had come in and they actually had conquered the land, but they had not really entered into the rest of the land. So here's what it says. There remains, this is verse 9. There remains, therefore, a rest for the people of God. For he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Now here's the kicker. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. So what is he saying here? What he's saying here is, listen, there's a rest that is available to us, but we're going to have to go out for it. We're going to have to labor to enter into that rest. What labor do we need to engage in? The labor of getting rid of unbelief, getting rid of the thoughts that want to captivate our minds. As Corinthians says, we need to bring those thoughts into captivity. So, and that takes that takes labor. That takes spiritual exercise. It takes spiritual diligence to come to the place where it says, if God said it, that settles it. If he said that we can come into a place where regardless what's going on around us, we can be at peace. He even said in the word to rejoice in tribulation. He didn't say to rejoice because of it. He said rejoice while you're in it. That's rest. That's rest. I often think of Jesus as he was getting ready for the crucifixion, knowing that he was going to be crucified within the next 48 hours. He went into the garden telling his disciples, my joy is to be full. I leave my joy with you, John 15. I'm going to speak on that sometime. But here we are. There's a rest that's available to you. It's available to me. It's available to each of us. But we're going to have to labor. What is the labor? We're going to have to let go of unbelief. We're going to have to let go of disbelief. We're going to have to stop being concerned about where we're supposed to be tomorrow. We need to rejoice in where we are today. And we need to come into an absolute confidence and faith that God indeed has a rest for you, for me, for each of us. And that rest has already been prepared. It may not look like it, but it's been prepared, and he wants us to enter into that rest. But in order to do so, we're going to have to lay aside unbelief. We're going to have to lay aside anything that would hinder us from absolutely continuing to actively believe on what he has said. You see, resting is not just being passive and say, well, whatever happens, I guess that's what's going to happen. No. You need to rise up in your spirit and say, if God said it, I believe it, that settles it. In fact, if God said it, that settles it, whether you and I believe it or not. Anyway, I want to leave these few thoughts with you and just tell you that I trust that your confidence is continuing to be growing in the Lord. Let his strength be sufficient for you. Look to him to guide you. Look to him to direct your thoughts. Oh, if I look back on my life and I see all the ways that God has led us and God has provided for us and God has always been there in the right place. I remember when we went to the communities years ago, a group of us as elders, we pointed to a place. We had no previous consultation together. We had prayed, says, where do we got to go? We pointed to one spot on the map, 3,000 miles away from home. Some 14 years later, the Lord told us our time there was finished. He told us to be in another city, actually in Terrace, British Columbia. He said to be there August 1st, 1986. We didn't have a place to live, but we were there in 1986. God had a place prepared for us. I feel the same way today. I don't know what next week holds. I don't know what next month holds. I don't know what the government's going to do to eliminate more of our liberties, but I know this. There's a rest that God has prepared for you and me. And I'm going to labor to enter into it. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. I want to encourage you to stay tuned, subscribe here. You can subscribe to these broadcasts, and that way you'll find out, you'll get a notice when another one is done. If you haven't gotten my book, Faith and Frontiers, I really would encourage you to get it. You can get it on Barnes & Noble, or you can get it on Amazon. You can get it from Friesen Press directly. I'll have some links in the comments here. Lord bless you. I'll see you again soon.